I'm Alicia Clements and I'm a costume and set designer, and right now I'm doing the costumes for Midsummer Night's Dream for Black Swan, amongst other things. And yeah, it's huge. It's the main thing I can say about it. First off, it's just massive. I mean, I probably started thinking about it at the end of last year, like November last year, and I've been mulling over ideas since then. On a show this size, it can take that long to actually sort through all your ideas and let them develop. I mean, you can have the beginning of an idea in November and it won't really make sense to you until 3 months later. That's, you know, if you know that you're actually working on that show that far in advance, which is great, and that's a luxury. But I've been quite lucky on this because I was doing a bit of traveling in between then and now, and you know, I grabbed a lot of ideas while I was away as well. What you really want, ideally, and that's what's happened this time and in previous situations where I worked on big shows, you start talking to the director from the very beginning. So I try not to get too far ahead of myself before I've spoken to the director, because they might have a completely different vision for the show, and you know, it's my job to facilitate that vision as well as bringing my own ideas in. So it's not hard as long as you're willing to be open. In the end, it's the director who knows the play the best and understands it the best. So you just trust them, and that's when you see the best work on stage, is when you really just have faith in the people who are in control. Yeah, I went to Whopper and I did costume and set design there. That was a couple of years ago, and it was just kind of piecing together lots of different interests that I had. I really liked performing and doing acting and dance, and I also really liked art and fashion design and architecture, you know, all these different things, and this turned out to be the way that I could bring all those different ideas together in the most creative and interesting way. So then I spent some time at Whopper, and I've been very fortunate in that I've been working full-time since I left, and I've been able to work on some really, really great shows. So like, I feel very lucky. Well, I think probably one of my luckiest breaks was I was in the Hotbed Ensemble, which was Black Swan's emerging artist group that was established a couple of years ago, and that we did The Dark Room and Pool No Water at Pika, and they were a really great stepping stone into the main stage. We had the facilities of Black Swan, but we were all just still finding our feet, so we found they were very nurturing, you know, and how they introduced us into working with the company. So that kind of allowed me to step straight into working with the main stage people at Black Swan. And last year I did 3 shows with Black Swan, so that took up most of my year. So I think 12th Night was probably one of the highlights, and that really helped me get used to tackling a big costume show like this, where you've got huge amounts of characters. It can be quite overwhelming, and the director, Roger Hodgman, was very directive and nurturing and really understanding, and just gave me such clear advice that I think that put me in really good stead to work on this show. So that was definitely a highlight. Yeah. Well, I think now's a really good time to be a young artist in WA, because the art scene is really growing. You know, we've got the new theatre, and there's a whole new, like, renewed interest in, I think, theatre as a whole. Now we've got this theatre that's in a really accessible place, and that's so exciting, because now people really can actually get out to the theatre, as I think before it was hard, you know, especially if you didn't have a car or all this kind of stuff. So I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time. Well, I'm really excited about Midsummer Night's Dream because well, it's the biggest show I've worked on so far, and it's allowing me probably the most creative freedom of any show that I've worked on. It's, I guess, the challenge and the exciting thing about the show is that there's 3 very different worlds within the play. So, for example, with 12th Night, every character belonged to the same environment. They're from the same society, so you're dressing people all to live within the same world. Whereas in this case, we've got 3 very different groups of characters. We've got the magical fairies, which is really exciting. Obviously, you don't usually get a chance to do something quite as conceptual as that. And we've got these incredibly wealthy, beautiful characters who live in the court. And then right at the other end, we've got the craftsmen who are rehearsing out in the woods. So developing those 3 looks is quite hard, but also really, really rewarding. And I want them to be very detailed. And there's always a mixture of contemporary references and period references, because I want the audience to be able to look at them and recognise things that they see in life, because that's what helps them to understand the characters. But then we can draw on bits and pieces from all throughout history, and we have the creative license to do that, which just aesthetically is a lot more interesting. Working on Shakespeare is one of those things where you can set it in any period that you want, or any location pretty much, as long as you can justify it. But at the same time, the characters aren't necessarily that easy to understand on a modern level. So there are often a lot of characters who are servants, and they're little underlings, and they are important, but it's not really written into their dialogue. So the costume designer really has to help the audience understand who they are and give them a personality. Otherwise they just become, lemmings in the background, and that, I think, can be the danger with Shakespeare, is not getting enough detail into the characters, and the audience can get a bit lost because they're never going to understand every word, and so it's really up to everyone else to help them along as much as possible. Luckily, Midsummer Night's Dream is a show that most people know pretty well. We've got 2 sets of lovers, one of them being quite unrequited. We have 2 men, Demetrius and Lysander, who are both in love with the same girl, Hermia. However, Helena is in love with Demetrius, and so we have Lysander and Hermia who are running away into the woods to escape Hermia being forced to marry someone she's not in love with, and Helena runs off after him. And in the meantime, we have a feud going on between the fairy kingdom, which is wreaking lots of mischief coming from Puck and the other fairy attendants. All the while this is happening, we have the craftsmen rehearsing in the woods, one of whom, Bottom, gets transformed into a donkey and made to fall in love with Titania, the fairy queen. So there's so much going on in this play, and it's really fun bringing the characters from the court, the 4 lovers, into the woods where they're so out of place in their environment, and they can't, walk on the ground properly because it's covered in weeds and flowers. And I think the fun thing is making it difficult for them to actually navigate their way across that set, which is a beautiful bed of flowers, basically. But it's quite difficult for them to work on, but we're doing that on purpose. It's going to be fun. But in terms of my favourite characters, I think I love the fairies. They're really conceptual and beautiful, but I think the most fun is actually the 4 lovers, and that's probably because they're young, and as a young designer, I can infuse a lot of modern references that things that I like in contemporary fashion or period fashion into their clothing. So it's almost like I'm designing my 4 ideal best friends or something. So that's actually been the most fun part of it, and characterising them and finding all their little nuances. That's been my favourite thing. Midsummer Night's Dream is opening May 11th at the State Theatre in Perth, and everyone should come along because it's going to be amazing.